everybody to the Tapped Out Podcast Network. I'm Nick McDaniel. We are the Tapped In Podcast, and we got this great rotation now of guests coming in as the co-host. And man, Matt Griffin from Action Wrestling is back with us. Matt, what's going on, buddy?
Oh, just real happy to be here again. I had a rare week off from wrestling, so I'm ready to talk before I have a four show weekend coming up.
Yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to have you. I know you got a loaded, weekend coming up for that matter. A couple shows in particular. We will be discussing, Myron and I, over on the Tapped Out podcast where we do the Making the Drive section. So make sure you're catching that. And the easiest way, folks, to catch every episode, whether it's, somebody like Matt Griffin joining me here on the Tapped In, Myron and I over on the Tapped Out podcast. Look, we get it. Everybody, YouTube, tappedoutpod.com. That's our YouTube channel. It's the easiest place. Subscribe to the channel, turn that notification bell. You don't ever miss an episode. But we're big fans of patreon.com/tappedoutpod because you're going to get the show notes. And we talk about that every week now with the news. We broke the spotlight up into the two shows. We go pretty rapid through the Indy Rewind and the Making the Drive section. So now those show notes are as important as ever. And for $1 a month, they're on that tier. That's simple. $1 a month, you get the show notes. $5, you get the weekly shows extra. $10, a month, you're going to get anything we ever do early. Also, the digital version of the Tapped Out Collectibles exclusive that we do every single month. I designed this month yesterday. A lot of people are going to be happy about this one. And, of course, at the $25 tier, you get the physical 8.5 by 11. And, Matt, I'll give you a teaser. I'm bringing them Friday to get them signed.
Yeah.
So that tells you it's, I'm not going to spoil it on the air.
Ooh.
But I'll tell you.
Now I want to know who the 8x10 is. I'll have to find out Friday.
Yep. Well, no, I'll tell you when we hit stop on this recording. I'll tell you off the air. But listen, man, we're going to get into all of our we're going to talk about the state of Georgia wrestling, where we kind of see it, and how literally much it's evolved in the last, in my opinion, 5 to 6 months alone. One of the first times you were on here this year, we talked about how the structure was, and there seemed like there was a clear, defined pecking order. I don't know that can be said now, clearly defined. And I'm not saying the players have changed. It's just not as simple. But that's coming later in the show when we do that, and we'll get into the Power 5 conversation. But as always here on the Tapped In Show, let's start right out of the gate with the Indy Rewind, where we take a look back at the weekend that was here in Georgia Indy Wrestling. And, man, shockingly, we say on Friday, One Fall Wrestling ran a show. Seems to be a trend on, how many shows they can get in a weekend. But they ran up at Gainesville. Look, but I don't know if you've seen the new American Legion venue they run there in Gainesville. It's a super fun venue, very low ceiling. The acoustics are crazy. It's a small building, but, dude, they're super passionate, super, just crazy, rabid fans in there. It's a show, by the way, that has seemed to have sold out every time they run that venue. 1FWLive.com, get your tickets ahead of time. Every show, it seems like the titles are on the line. It just feels kind of like that's just kind of the way they run the thing. Brady Booker defending that title, picked up a big win over Jimmy Wild. QT, Billy Gunn team up. They take on Ward and Elijah Drago and pick up a win. But I'm telling you one thing to watch at One Fall, and I know you actually, we talked about this briefly before we hit record. The women's division there is getting crazy. They did a handicap match. Angelica Riss, by the way, shout out to Angelica Riss. She got a shout out on the Jeff Jarrett podcast from Jeff Jarrett himself and Conrad Thompson. She's picking up a lot of steam, and I think that she's kind of making a huge push here to be the new 1FW women's champion. But that's, and again, check them out every single week now. Peachtree Sports TV, Triller TV, Peachtree Sports on Tuesdays, Triller TV on Wednesdays. Just real quick, I wanted to ask your thoughts, because I haven't had a chance really to talk to you a ton about it. They've picked up these TV deals real quick. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I know there's been a long time coming for One Fall. Last year in their previous incarnation, they did a pilot TV taping. So that would have been about 18 months ago or so. That went really well by all accounts. So I think retooling and kind of figuring it out to get on Peachtree TV took a little bit, but The good thing about somebody like QT Marshall is he's going to make sure he's got all his ducks in a row. Like, he did a lot of prep before the center stage show. He's made a lot of connections. So when he goes ahead and launches something, it's pretty set for success. He's got a great guy, Scott Barnett, who handles a lot of the business as far as setting up new venues and shows. And, they're essentially a mini territory in itself right now. I don't think they're trying to sell tickets off the television, but they do have television. They do have a central spot where it looks like they're going to be running monthly TV out of McDonough. And then they're touring the state. I've done a few other shows to help out. They've had multiple venues that they've run at the same time on the same day. So, sometimes it's an accomplishment if you have an independent in Georgia who runs once every month or two, and they're often having two shows at the same time. And, there was that Saturday in May, they had 4 shows at the same time. So they're right now, they're getting in all over the state. This is not an area that is small. I mean, you're talking Gainesville to McDonough is a heck of a drive. They've also done some shows in North Georgia. They've really tried to get around, and I know they're still looking to expand. They've basically got every Friday night, multiple Mondays, and then I laugh with Scott Barnett all the time about how I need to go ahead and get his venue schedule so I can go undercut him and steal his venues, because they're doing great work. Yeah. I mean, One Fall is basically on a different level right now.
Oh yeah, and we're going to dive a lot into that here in some of our later conversation, without question. But let's keep it moving. SCA, Squared Circle Action, they ran their big fighter web show up in Royston, Georgia at the Royston Dome. The big news coming out of there was 2 things. One, Luke Da Silva cashed in the Power Square after Scott Mason had successfully run the gauntlet at Fighter Web. Cashes in, and Luke Da Silva is your new SCA heavyweight champion. Not the only champion crowned over. Hunter James also defeated Alexander Lev, and he is the new Georgia Heritage champion coming out of that show. And that's a title it's literally defended all over the state of Georgia. Kudos to Hunter James. We may come back to that down the road. Also on this show, there was a triple threat. Greatness Incorporated had 2 teams trying to dethrone Tower and Xander Seabolt. Couldn't get on the same page, and I say page intentionally because Richard Page couldn't keep his team on the same page. Therefore, they come up short. They are going to have more to say to that come down the road. Of course, they are available on YouTube and on HTC, which is a channel up there in the northeast corner of Georgia. It's available for you. Check them out. They, of course, are going to run every single Friday. We'll be talking about them, their 10/17 show. They're going to be a TV taping there, special Halloween edition, this coming up Friday. Myron and I'll talk about that over on Making the Drives. Also on Friday, DWA ran in Atlanta. Chainmail, him and Dominic Stuckey, long, feud seems to be going on. It seems Stuckey picks up a win. Jazzy Yang, she retained her women's title. Grayson Pierce, they had a match with Keelan Cole to determine who would be the number 1 contender for Neji Ichiban's title. Chaos ensues. He gets involved. It's a no contest. You ever have a feeling a triple threat's coming sometimes? If we can't keep these things resolved, seems to be the case. Of course, Northside Heroes, they defeated the Wonder Boys. Wonder Boys, a team that seems to be hitting all over the state as well, but they've come up short on that night, Friday there, and Northside are still the top dogs when it comes to the tag team at DWA. Their matches are on IWTV, something you're super familiar with. Check them out, and their new shows. Their next show is going to be on October the 24th. Had a chance to speak to the people, the powers that be there. They are looking to up their schedule, and we'll be talking about that as well here in the next few weeks on the Making the Drives and on the Tapped Out podcast as well. Saturday night, headed down to Forsyth. I was actually in the building. WrestleMecca ran their big Halloween show. It's kind of like their WrestleMania show. As you could probably tell if you're reading the show notes, pretty loaded card. Luka Daniels comes up big with an I Quit match win over Michael Stevens. That thing had been going on for about a year. They brought everything but the kitchen sink. There were ladders, tables, trash cans, you name it. There were kendo sticks, as you probably imagine. Only to be outdone, in my opinion. I say that respectfully. The House of Madness match, Happy Madness, Sourdough and Sunny Days. They defeat the Backbone, Zach Edwards and Shane Curtis, in a match you're going to have to see. That's all I will tell you, Matt, if you haven't seen it yet. It was a sight to behold. There were Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles involved, literally life size. There were kids involved in a pinfall. There was a football spot where Happy Madness got to play a little football in the gym. Very, very entertaining, as you can probably imagine. They ended up picking up a win. Happy Madness did, with the help of a whole bunch of kids, and I'll share that picture on social media. Bryce Cannon, he defeated Dominic Stuckey to retain the Liberty Championship. Bryce Cannon back. He had a little short window. He had an injury. Glad to see he's back. I'll tease the fact he's coming back here soon. He'll be back on the Tapped In show pretty soon. KJ Impala. Listen, I will ask you this. I'm not sure for me. I know you know KJ a little bit. CT Keys and Fried Eddie were a team. Clearly they have some issues. But KJ involved himself in a triple threat match for his WrestleM America Championship. Probably not the smartest move. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, not the smartest move to get involved, especially when it's a triple threat and you can potentially lose a belt without even losing the fall. I mean, you don't want to voluntarily get into too many multi-person matches where you could be out of the ring and go ahead and lose the championship. So not the smartest move, but it looks like it turned out all right.
It did work out for him because CT Keys and Fried Eddie could just not get along in any shape, form, or fashion.
Imagine that with those personalities. Imagine that with those personalities that they couldn't get along.
And the crazy thing was they had been a team there. They had been such a dominant team. At one point, CT Keys was your Liberty champion. Fried Eddie was your WrestleM America champion. And they were the tag team champions. I mean, and they still could not agree because at some point, like you pointed out, and I'm not saying, but you might know a little thing about egos, that those two egos, I just said you might know a thing about dealing with them. I didn't say you had one. Let's be fair. That they... You thought, see, you just assumed, right?
I do know a lot about big egos, yes.
Yes. So, obviously, KJ Impala did retain. He is successfully, you're going to be there. Heading into their next show, which is November the 8th, they did announce at the show that Sal Rinauro, Bryce Cannon, Luka Daniels, and KJ Impala will be in a four-way with both titles potentially on the line there in that match. Follow them on social media to see how that's going to play out, folks. And this show, of course, will be on YouTube as well. Also on Saturday, Bullpin Pro Wrestling, Temple, Georgia. Everybody knew that they had a hiccup there with the scheduling, and they had to move from Villa Rica to Temple at the last minute. Bull Buchanan, look, he's going to pull out all the stops, and he does. Zach Buchanan, he did, he was DQ'd in his big match that he had with Judias due to some interference. Lots of craziness and that kind of stuff going on down there. Xander Orrick and BK Bennett picking up a win over Brad Lynch and Kyle Gunner. Ryan Wendell still rolling as, one of the top dogs there in the bullpen as well. The question is, a couple things coming out of this show. Brad Lynch accused Bull Buchanan of being the Midnight Rider, but Buchanan was in the crowd and the Midnight Rider appeared to help BK and Xander, so Brad Lynch, I hate to tell you, story's not working. Buchanan, as great of a dude as he is, can't be in two places at once. So let's just leave it at it as is. There's also a little bit of friction there with Zach Buchanan and his group. So we're going to see how all that plays out between those two. I will tell you this. I'm really jacked about Xavier Cross and his potential future. Massive young man. It was weird that I'd never put two and two. You ever have a guy, and because you speak to this, you see a lot of these big, gigantic dudes. I didn't realize how big this kid was until I saw him toe-to-toe, face-to-face with Judias, and he was bigger, like taller. It didn't. You know how sometimes you just see somebody and you're like, hey, he's tall. But when you have the comparison, it just kind of sets it apart.
Yeah, perspective in wrestling is weird because you already have, if you're looking at wrestlers in a ring, they're already bigger than you, and you don't necessarily know how to compare two people who are of similar size. So, that's something that crosses up people with wrestling, whether they're much bigger than you think they are or reverse, much smaller than they are. And, sometimes you see a big person in a match, and until you get the proper perspective, you really can't understand how muscular, how tall, just their size. It can be really interesting how it's not like we're lining everybody up next to each other to see him.
And sometimes just
Yep.
walking out of the entrance, it doesn't, you know what I mean? It just doesn't click that when a guy's 6'11" and another dude's 7'4", like, whatever, like, like they're both huge, but then you see them side by side and you're like, oh, that guy's really taller than the other guy. Also at this show, Xavier Cross and Jacob Ashworth picked up a win over Lincoln and Wood there. However, at post-match, Alexander Lincoln smashed his University of Alabama diploma over the head of Jacob Ashworth. And as Bull Buchanan wanted to point out, clearly we're heading to some type of Georgia-Alabama war. And I hate to say this, but there's really only one guy from Alabama that I can stomach as a wrestler. It feels like he knows who he is. So, again, check out Bullpen. I know there's a lot going on. You want to throw something in there about that guy from Alabama, don't you?
I mean, I talked a long time about Adam Priest being, one of the best independent wrestlers in the world. And then, on an event earlier this year with, a co-show with Action, a guy named Brian Danielson said the exact same thing. And, he's been on AEW TV the last several weeks. So, guys from Alabama do pretty okay.
That one. We'll say that guy. We'll go with that one.
Yeah.
Because you've had some run-ins with some guys from Alabama that has not gone well for you. So it's that guy's good. Let's go with that.
Yes.
Again, Bullpen on YouTube. Again, their next show is November the 8th. Let's keep it rolling to Sunday, October the 12th there. Kraken Pro Wrestling, Tifton, Georgia. By the way, huge fan. Check them out on YouTube. I love the way they take their show. They break it up into like a weekly little TV show. Charlie Kills. He wins the Cash in Hand Championship and the pot of $500. Left Hand Path, they pick up a win over Vice Cream. The Business, they defeated the All-Star Special, and they took the lead. Now they are 5 points, and the All-Star Special is now all the way at -2 points in tag team season. That's still going heavy strong. At one point, clearly All-Star was the favorites, it felt like at one point. That clearly is not the case now. Kevin Cantrell picked up a big win over Jay Too Strong. Joey Hyder picked up a win over Brother Azrael. On and on and on. Had a great crowd there. The top story there, though, is the Business has taken back over the top threat there in the points as we talk about the tag team season. Clearly now they are the threat. Also, by the way, at the same time, to the Kraken champion, Trevor Aon. Kind of eager to see how this all plays out over the next few months, because this thing, again, was the tag team season, was a whole year, and it will be all the way at their anniversary show when they crown those champions. So kind of eager to see how this plays out. Listen, by the way, end of this show, the Business and the Left Hand Path, they finally get to come face to face. They're setting up something huge at the next month's show, which is November the 9th, by the way. Again, to keep up with all of this action there at Kraken, again, the weekly TV show kind of breaks it up easy for you right there on YouTube. Also on Sunday, Scrappy Championship Wrestling. Go ahead.
I'm going to interject. You know what? Kraken has been, down in Tifton. It's kind of out of, I mean, I know you're real familiar with them, but if you're not, I mean, they've been over the last year doing a really big, they've been doing a great job of building. They transferred buildings to upgrade to a building that had more seating. They've been, and let's be honest, Sunday afternoons in October are really rough to run. So it sounds like they drew pretty well. Sundays, well, like Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays with football schedules going on are difficult. But they're a group that every time I see them, every time I talk with Hanson or Huckabee, they continue to grow a little bit. And, I know that there are people who are watching the YouTube show. I have a friend, John Morehouse, who watches it in chunks and puts out reviews on the show. And Kraken is really doing a good job of continuing to build business. And they're doing it slowly, incrementally, and with purpose. They're not just like, oh, we're going to rent a building where we can put 500 and we're going to blow it all up. And then, there's over the years, you've had plenty of promotions that we've forgotten about that ran a few shows and then fell off simply because they were money losers. And everything I can see that Kraken is doing is going well and keeps pointing up to give more to build on.
Agreed. The
So
new venue is spectacular. They're creative from a business perspective, which I know you would actually get a kick out of. They have a platform now that they put tables on, and they sell table, seating, and
mhm.
so it's a little more of a premium. So it's kind of like a cool little. They're going out. I love what they do is one of the things I will say, they have created a culture down there where they have people that are buying into it as well. And what I mean by that is the venue is invested in their growth. It's not just, hey, we're renting a venue from you. The venue's actually kind of, hey, you can use this as a feature. You could use this as something as an asset for your show because it'll make your show better. And like little things, I've had conversations with them, and I love that I see sponsors invested, building invested, city invested, the community in general. They're on TV down there, like there's a whole lot of things. I think that's why I see them long term. Like you mentioned, they're not somebody who ran out, grabbed a venue, and is starting to run a show. Like they
Yeah,
got buy-in.
that's the easy part. Is running a show, depending on how you might decide to do it, is actually really easy. What's the difficult part is to go ahead and run a show that's profitable, even small profitable. Any way you can gain profit. It does. You don't. We don't have to be talking about thousands of dollars, but if you can earn enough to run the next show and continue to grow and continue to build, there are people who can get interested along the way and want to help build you up. I mean, that's the exact same thing I did. Peek behind the curtain. Hanson and I had a conversation last year where I laid out a lot of stuff. I told him, "Hey, you know what? You're in an area where there's there's not professional sports. There's not, think of yourself as like the local, double A baseball team. You are the local sports franchise. Think about and market yourself like that." And we talked about a bunch of different stuff, what that meant to me. I'm not in a small town, so there's a lot of things he can do that I can't. I was like, here's what I would try if I was in a small town, and here's why. And just the fact that they're growing is a huge deal, because you don't want to start off, in my opinion, you don't want to start off really big and then fall off because you can't match what you did in your first few shows, because then you're turning away people. But if you're growing and you're building, people buy in, and wrestling fans are creatures of habit. So if you get people who are, hey, this is what I do one Sunday afternoon a month. Okay, when is the next show? Yep, I put it in my phone. I got it in my calendar, and this is what you go do every month. It's just like people on Tuesday nights. Hey, that's trivia night. That's when I go play trivia. Hey, that's when I have my weekly or monthly poker game. People are creatures of habit, and if you can get them into that habit and bring a lot of people along for the ride, you'll continue to grow.
We may touch on this later because sometimes, though, when you accidentally break that habit for them, it's a problem. Like we used to play trivia every week with some friends of ours. They go on vacation. We go on vacation the next week. We don't do it for 2 consecutive weeks. When we come back, we haven't done it since. Because literally all it took was 2 weeks to break the cycle. And then it was like, then you start making excuses of why you can't do it anyway. So you have to keep them on pace. That is without question a thing. Again, last but not least, Scrappy Championship Wrestling. They ran the Royston Dome up there this past Sunday. DJ Smoke took a big win over Michael Walker. He is the new lightweight champion. Easy for me to say there. Luke Da Silva picked up a win. CT Keys at Scrappy Championship Wrestling on a Sunday. This is why you always kind of have to follow every promotion every single week. I always tell people on social media, because you never know who's going to pop up here and there. Alexander Lev was in the house. Hunter James and Nick Halen put on what I heard was an absolute clinic of a wrestling match on this show.
Figure.
Hunter James, shocking, right? But those two had a great match. Hunter James comes out on top. Jacob Ashworth faced Christian Taylor, and he did pick up a win. I want to ask, are you familiar with Christian Taylor at all? Because this kid is starting to pop up everywhere, and he's actually starting to, I've noticed, climb the pecking order in some of these places as well, which is a huge thing for me.
Yeah, he's shown up in action a few times. I've seen him over at Southern Fried. He's somebody who's really trying to get on shows the right way and trying to meet people, and he's at a lot of shows. So I am a little bit familiar with him. And I know right at the end of the action building run for Southern Honor, he's involved with Grayson Pierce. So he's getting some play in a lot of different areas around the state. And he's, from what I've seen, really promising with a lot of room to grow. That's always what you want. You don't want to look at somebody and say, like, well, I think that's the best match they're capable of. You want to see somebody that's like, that was good, and in 6 months and 12 months, that match and they as a wrestler will be better.
I appreciated the reason I wanted to highlight this particular match. A lot of people are, Nick, why are you Jacob Ashworth and Kristen Taylor? They've wrestled a couple places, and they have. Jacob Ashworth has picked up a win in every single time they've faced each other. But I love that Kristen Taylor took it and did go check it out if you haven't followed him on social media. He did I don't want to even call it a promo because it wasn't a promo. He did a vignette. He's starting to come up with this crazy character, kind of like an American Psycho, where it's in his head, the voices, etc. But it was about how every time he faces Jacob Ashworth, he comes up short. He had to beat Jacob Ashworth. He had to be, and it's him, the internal struggle. I'm going to leave it at that. But the reason I appreciated it so much is I was like, I just appreciated the effort into trying something different to promote, like, for this one particular match. He did it for one match. And he put that kind of effort into it. And I was like, that's why I'm a fan of the kid. And I love the effort going behind everything that he's trying to do there. So Scrappy is also available on YouTube. Their next big show is December the 14th. They run kind of, I don't want to say it's bi-monthly, quarterly, depending on their schedule. So I always tell you, follow them on social media as well. That was everything that we got, because now, as everybody knows, Matt, you've probably heard me say this 100 times, so I always try to reiterate it, probably that for the next week or two, and I'll be done saying this. We only cover the promotions that are sending the information in, or that I'm physically at. If I'm at your show, I will take care of it, I promise you. But if it's not, you got to send it in. I think Matt is a promoter and owner. Let me ask you, do I not make it as pretty simple as I possibly can with that form?
You do. It's, it takes me a whole, 2, sometimes 3 minutes to go ahead and send in my information, which, I always assume somebody should be sending you the results, but just in case, no, it's good because, I also want to make sure as a promoter, get my stuff out there like, hey, this is next. These are the stories we're pushing. It's actually not the results that I want you to know. It's the everything else so that it can be discussed. Obviously the results as well, because I put, as a booker, I try to have every match on the show with intention to do something. Whether it's a story angle, showcase a wrestler, sometimes it's just to have a really good, exciting match and see how a couple wrestlers do to use in the future. But it's really the stories and the angles and where we go from here. I've been telling some wrestlers, I kind of developed something over the last year. All right, I'm gonna ask you this. Maybe I've never asked before. What's the most important thing of every wrestling show?
My hopes are, if I'm running the show, it's like that we perform well enough that we get them to come back to the next show.
That's great. The most important aspect of any wrestling show has nothing to do with that night. The most important aspect of any wrestling show is to sell tickets to the next one. Mm-hmm. That's it. But that's how you draw houses on angles, because people have seen, for example, 3 shows in a row and you're building this story and it's like, oh, we're going to do the cage match on this 4th show. Well, hopefully you've promoted it right and built it right, and the 4th show with the cage match is the biggest one and you have the most excitement. But the goal of any show is always to push tickets and interest for the next one, because you at that show, like at 7:30 bell time, I've basically done what I'm going to do for tonight. The only thing I can try to do is get interest going for the next one. You can, you just have to at bell time assume all your wrestlers are really dialed in with you creatively, that you've done the work as far as putting the matches together, and that's just going to play out how it plays out. There's a lot of work to do creatively, but if you deliver that night, you can get interest and sell tickets for the next one.
I don't do this often, but I want to ask you a follow-up that'll kind of sidebar off. I know it'll get us off topic for a second, but it's one of the things, like, attendance is like a huge thing. Like, people put a lot of stock into it. But what I try to tell them, like TV ratings, by the way, there's going to be a whole TV ratings conversation, follow up to last week on the Tapped Out show with Myron and I. But I always tell people, just because this show that you just ran 300, it doesn't speak to the quality of that show. It's the quality of the shows, the one before that, and the one before that, etc., that led to that build. Like TV ratings, I always say, if tonight's episode did great, I don't think it's that show's quality. It's the ones in the weeks prior to that are what caused that bump in the ratings, not tonight. Would you agree with that or disagree, like?
I would agree with that. And also, in independent wrestling, we're not touring groups. I mean, we generally have, like I have multiple buildings that I do regular shows in, and even one fall that's going across the state, they have their, hey, first Friday we're in this venue, second Friday we're in this venue. So you have to, you're going to vary depending on what's going on, depending on what you book, depending on other things. I mean, it's always going to vary, but you have to keep that consistency. You can never overreact to a house that does well or does poorly, and you should just you just got to continue to evaluate what you're doing. But if you're going to be in this for the long haul, you're going to be running your same buildings for years. And if you look at Landmark Arena, decades, that's and sometimes you have buildings that have multiple shows. I mean, how many decades has it gone on for the Royston Dome? Yes, the players in charge and the names changed, but it always says Live Pro Wrestling at the top of the poster. Southern Fried in Monroe has changed venues, but they're still in Monroe, and they've been there for over 10 years. It's you got to continually, and you're also going to have that churn. You're going to have people who might come out once a year. I just had my free outdoor show in Tyrone a week ago. I have people who come out to that show. They come early. They bring blankets. They bring lawn chairs, and that's the only wrestling show they see. They don't come buy tickets. They come because it's an event that the town put on. Mm-hmm. They're going to buy something from the food trucks and enjoy a night. And that's my one opportunity I have to sell them a T-shirt, get them to get interested, and if not, if they never buy a ticket, that's still okay. That's a new fan base, a piece of the fan base. That's why I think it's important to run different areas, because the biggest example of that is the July Center Stage show. I remember you talking about how, it wasn't just an Atlanta crowd. It was a crowd they drew in from all their normal towns they've been running for months. So that's exactly what they did. They ran a big show. They were able to coalesce a lot of people. And then you have 700 people at Center Stage who might see a show in one location every week, or they might see a show in another location every week, and they were able to get them all together. Basically, the short of this is promoting correctly is a lot of work. And if you're not sure what you're doing, you can easily burn yourself out very quickly and lose a lot of money. Because anybody can run wrestling. It's actually easy to run wrestling. It's very difficult to run pro wrestling and any sort of events well. That's the difficult part.
And long term. Yes. Yeah, that's. I agree with that. So, man, we've recapped everything that went down in this past week. So now we come to the segment every single week where we kind of look back and we ask ourselves here at the Tapped In Show, well, who actually won the week? That is the question. Some weeks it's cut and dry. We always talk about that here on the show. And I've kind of included you guys into this conversation, the guys that are coming on and helping here host the show. So I'll let you start. We're going to talk this through versus, because this week's not as cut and dry per se, as like, hey, who's the easy winner? So we'll kind of talk it out. Where would you start in this conversation this week?
Well, this week, I look at the reports you send out, and there's a decent amount of shows, but there's no shows on here that drew there's nothing on here that drew in excess of 200 people. There are events that are happening all over the state. But it was kind of I didn't run this week. I've got every other week in October. I didn't run this week. So the glaring thing to me in thinking about it is that the winner should have been Southern Honor, because this was the week. It didn't get announced because obviously of what happened in July with news that the building and actually the entire structure was going to be taken over by the town officially and torn down. But it should have been Southern Honor, because they were going to be running their Still Here event. They were going to be having their anniversary event, and it's if you know what the main event for the next show is, when they come back at Reformation Brewery in November, it should be no surprise that was going to be the main event for Still Here. And that show, I feel very strongly, coming off of Rumblejack, coming off of what they've done in past years for their anniversary, even on a Friday night in Georgia, I feel like that would have been a huge house, a huge interest. This is a story with me versus Gary Lamb that's gone on since I walked in over 2 years ago, and we only finally got physical. And it really it's a shame that the timing didn't work out, where they could have had the building for another month and had another Still Here show. I think that would have been. I think they would have been the clear.
Did you get a reprieve?
A reprieve?
Somebody asked me that. I just want to ask somebody. The word was out there that, are you happy that it got pushed back a month because it gave you like another month?
I want to get my hands on Gary Lamb. He embarrassed me at the last Southern Honor Wrestling show. He knocked me loopy. I don't even remember the main event or what happened with Gunnar Miller, because he punched me so damn hard. So I want the chance to tape up my fists and go after him now. I don't feel like I got a reprieve. I feel like I got more study time. Okay. And he's got the hometown advantage. He's got a lot of things going for him, but I've been hit with light tubes before. I've had, David Manders stapled like $7 bills to my head. And, hey, I lost that one in Monroe, but I fought like hell to get Southern fried from him. And I'm not losing this one.
Listen, I give credit where credit is due. You're a death match guy. A cage match should be a walk in the park, right?
I am not afraid, if that's what you're asking. I'm not afraid.
There you go. However, that did not happen. It is going to be pushed back 1 month. So going to everything, I think, because with it winning the week, it can be a wrestler, it can be a promoter, it can be an owner, it can be a promotion, it can be whatever, we've kind of picked. I went through everything and I went, you kind of got a good case, and I hate giving this little credit at times, but you got to get, I tipped my cap to Hunter James. He picked up a huge win. We talked about it. Great match between, him and Nick Halen on Sunday at Scrappy. But, however, also on Friday, he picked up the Georgia Heritage title by defeating Alexander Lev. Alexander Lev making a ton of waves in Georgia. He's going to be a focal point of that Still Here show when it runs, where he'll take on Joe Black for the Southern Honor title. And not to mention, if you track the lineage of what that Georgia Heritage title, what it kind of stemmed from and where it came from, there's a long line there. And so you got to tip your cap. So my vote for this week is, as much as it pains me to say, and he knows it is, would be Hunter James picking up 2 huge wins over the weekend. So enjoy the beach, kid, and enjoy your title reigns. That's going to leave me. I wanted to ask another conversation that we're going to get into the Power 5, and it's the promotions, who's the Power 5 promotions right now. But I wanted to, before we get there, I wanted to ask you, a while back you were on here and we kind of talked about the top 5 promotions and who they are and made their cases for them or whatever. But even since January or February, that time frame, everything's kind of just completely, in my opinion, I talked about it a little bit last week, just the shake up across the state of what do you think before we get into the Power Five? Like, is there a clear defined top five anymore? Like, there's just, these are the five, no questions asked.
I mean, I think, you know, you could have several different people on here and have several different lists, and it's going to depend on their biases. It's going to depend on where they work. It's going to depend on what you see as criteria. I've always been open since I started Action Wrestling about my criteria of a successful promotion, and that was being seen outside the state, having wrestlers who were recognized, not just in Georgia but nationally. You know, we have. I know you did the rundown on the PWI 500 on Georgia wrestlers ranked. Hey, most of them have been through Action, and Action got a lot of mentions. You know, that's to me, and being on IWTV, those things to me are what I wanted, and I think of a top dog promotion. But I think right now, based on all the criteria, you know, One Fall is running the most shows, I think, period. They are by far running the most shows in the most venues in a incredibly varied area. If you look at where they've had shows all scheduled, you know, they have shows that are scheduled, you know, the hours from each other. So they're trying to run an actual territory, and then they coalesced everything in July at Center Stage. I think that, you know, they are absolutely a top dog right now.
Hold on, I want to push a little bit here now, because I knew you. By the way, we all should be having this conversation, you know, and I agree with 100% of what you just said. They're running from Hartwell, which is as close to South Carolina as you could get. You could literally throw a rock and hit it. McDonough, you know, Watkinsville, Athens, Gainesville, you know, just start. The last schedule I'd gotten, and I know I'm going to get a text about it. I know you're listening. The last text I got was like, hey, in October, we're going to run like 11 shows in October. And it's like, I got it. You're probably going to hit 12. You're probably on pace to that. And November 1st and 2nd, you're running a show. So literally within, you know, a couple of days of it, you're still going to be there. My pushback has become, and I had this conversation with a few people over the, you know, the last probably 2 weeks. I don't even know, like, okay, they're not real. I'm not saying they're not a Georgia promotion. I'm just kind of saying they're not the same anymore.
So I have a question, because you know, we talked about this on air too, and I'm just going to throw it out there. If they run November 1st and November 2nd, I know they're running Halloween, which is a Friday, and I know they're running in Hampton on October 30th. So you're talking they have multiple events in multiple venues over a long 4-day weekend. That's impressive as hell. But I think the whole Georgia, you know, what defines a Georgia promotion? Because I have a lot of people who over the years who said that Action isn't a Georgia promotion, and I'm like, why not? Why? Because I'm not solely, you know, 95% of my talent are the wrestlers who are wrestling just in Georgia, because I have a lot of wrestlers who come in from Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, North Carolina. Heck, I've got wrestlers coming in from Illinois this weekend. You know, in August and again in December, I have wrestlers coming down from New England. You know, that makes a Georgia promotion to me, because I'm making it possible for these guys to network with each other, and for wrestlers to get other bookings elsewhere. But you know, I think it just depends what makes it. Here's my pushback. What makes a promotion a Georgia promotion? Just somebody who uses all people who live in the state of Georgia and have a 45-minute drive home after a show every night?
And and here's the thing, because I always tell people, I'm not saying they're not a Georgia promotion to the core. It's probably because if all of their shows are run in Georgia and they use indie talents, which they do, look, I don't cover people outside of the state of Georgia, because I always say they have to run their primary shows in Georgia. I get it. They're going to be somebody like, you know, you'll go off and run something in Tennessee, but you're primarily you run in Georgia. So Action counts, and I even cover you when you run in Tennessee, you know, or something like that. Bullpin crosses the state line occasionally, and they run in Alabama, but if you run all of your shows in Alabama, I just don't cover you're not a Georgia promotion. All that to say, this is probably one of the most complex and hypocritical things of anything when I say, like, they are a Georgia promotion, And that's what I told people, though. I'm just saying they're not the same. They're different in a way because they have resources that are. Listen, this is a word I didn't use this. I'm not going to tell you. I'll tell you maybe off air who told me this. But their words were, it's just not fair. The resources that are there. And you'll be shocked when who said those words. But it was like, so I'm not saying they don't count. It's just when we start doing lists and comparisons and whatever, I'm kind of like, it's apples and oranges versus apples and apples. But I'm not saying they're not one of the best promotions in Georgia, because they are. Does that make any sense?
I agree.
Like
It's always going to be such a thing of resources and just pure definitions with what makes a Georgia promotion Georgia. This is the conversation I've had with Larry Goodman before. When ranking wrestlers in Georgia, and it's like I remember one list came out a couple years ago, and it ranked wrestlers in Georgia, and it said something like 75 or 50% of the wrestlers' matches had to be in Georgia. I'm like, well, if that's the case, I don't want to have anybody on the list, because I want my talent to be here on a Friday, go up to like Indiana and Black Label Pro, or to TWE in Chattanooga, or somewhere else, or Deadlock Pro on Saturday, Sunday. I want my talent to be here and then to go work elsewhere. I consistently have talent who it's like, hey, where are you tomorrow? And they're not in a town an hour away. They're in a state, 6 hours away. And those are pretty consistent things. I have Lycos Gym in this weekend. They are from England. They're from the UK. They're wrestling here Friday, and then they're wrestling in the Cleveland, Ohio area on Saturday. That's pretty cool. I guess it's so much of it is. The whole Power Five thing is interesting to me, because it's certainly not anything set in stone, and it's going to be whatever somebody's biases are. Like if you're biased to a promotion who runs weekly, then realistically your top promotions are going to be One Fall and the shows out of the Royston Dome on Friday nights.
Right. Is it monthly? Is it bi-monthly? What's the minimum? Because I'll ask you, because every list we create, they create, whoever they are, we let that be whoever those people are. I always say we a lot of times set the criteria to be however we want it to end up.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, why does viral not count? Well, they only run 6 times a year, or 5. They are bi-monthly. You got to run monthly. Who said?
Yeah. It's all very interesting, because I'll tell them, as much as I cannot wait to punch him in the face, the best regular promoter of wrestling in Georgia is Gary Lamb. But if you're just talking about the best promoter overall, regardless of shows, it's Ricardo with Mucho Lucha Atlanta. But Ricardo runs pretty much like quarterly events, because his events are, you talk about sponsors. You talk about setting up autograph appearances the night before shows. You're talking about, somewhere in the anywhere from 12 to 1,700 people in attendance, So it all depends on, a lot of people don't necessarily consider Ricardo because he runs a show, let's say every 3 months, for example. So it just very strictly depends on what your definition is. Personally, I like all the lists simply because they're discussion points. I don't think they necessarily matter. Sometimes people's criteria make me chuckle, and it's like, okay, slow down.
Right.
But I do think it's very interesting.
Listen, you multiple times on this show, the Tapped Out show, when we do list, I reiterate, dude, it's our list. I'm not saying it's the end all be all. You should not be angry. Any list. By the way, with all due respect to the PWI 500, I've said the exact same thing. If you're on the list, you should be happy and proud. If you're not on the list, it shouldn't cost you any sleep tomorrow. Like it's okay, because I don't know how they come up with the list. Doesn't matter, in my opinion. Our list, Larry Goodman's list, like they're all lists. To me, at the end of the day, they are made to drive conversation, and that kind of thing. As long as you're not being let's just make a list and let's make one that makes everybody mad to create it. That's a different thing. Like, I genuinely say, like, for example, we're looking at the Power 5 this particular episode. We're going to get into it. Let's dive into it a little bit here when we're talking about the making the drive stuff. And, I just kind of came back to when the players, it seemed like they were the clear defined 5. Listen, and we say this not because you're sitting here. Action is always on every list when we have these promotions conversations for every reason. And I don't have to say them. You've already said them, but I agree with the stuff that you said. Southern Fried's always been on the list. They're a staple. They've been running longer than we've been doing this podcast, and that feels like decades. I know it's only a decade, but it just feels like decades at times. Southern Honor. Look, this is not something, I have said it to multiple people, and it used to be they're on the list. Well, the question is now, I think there's a question mark because we don't know what do they look like. They were always on the list because their production was way better than everybody else's. There were so many things that they had that no one else could give you. Do they have those things going forward? I don't know.
In my opinion, Southern Honor isn't on the list. They are on a whatever you would call an injured reserve, because it's going to depend on that first show in November at Reformation Brewery, because it is such a monumental, more than any promotion in the state, Southern Honor has depended on that building because they haven't run shows outside the building. I very much hope that it's going to be different. I very much hope it comes back and it's strong. It's going to have to be strong in a different way, which is okay. And who knows, in a few months, Gary may find a new building that he's got, and everything kind of, we're settled in, we've got a new building and we're doing production and it's similar. But, the crowd has to come back. I feel like Southern Honor, with just the timing of it, is kind of on that injured reserve list. Like, let's see what happens.
So let's say bumping them. Listen, the hypotheticals. Let's say they are kind of a TBD. Like, they're on a side barge for temporarily. And look, we're not. The thing I always strive about our.
I don't even think that's a bad thing. It's just a realistic thing. Because there's a lot of opportunity there when you go into a new venue, because there are going to be new fans who will come out even though Reformation is like a mile away. They're going to come out because, you mean I get to see fighting and drink beer? Yeah, absolutely. I run a venue 15 minutes away from my normal venue. I run a brewery. I have people who just come to that brewery show. It's still a Friday night. I have people who come to that because it's a PG-13 show, because they hang out at the brewery and it's something to do while they're, having their 4 or 5 beers over the course of a night. So there are going to be fans who maybe Southern Honor is done for, but there's a entirely new fan base that is able to be tapped into. Pardon the pun.
Listen,
you like that?
Yeah. Let me ask you. I made a comment to somebody that I thought one of the best things to happen for Southern Honor was when Gary was away for a while, because it made them do some things different. Reformation, they may go into this brewery. Look, Gary's an event guy. Dylan's a production, hey, let's get in there. And it's not like they don't have access to some other people who's got some cool audio knowledge that they can do. They may do something special at that venue, and it becomes a vibe of its own. It's not the action building. It's, it's not saying it's better. It's different. And I stress to you, I thought the same thing. If it's an opportunity to grow, because the loyals will move. But if you can bring in a new audience by just putting it in a different venue, that'll shake up everything. It could be a whole lot of opportunity for them. So we're going to take them off. Like, we're just saying, so with that 5 left, one fall, action. Here's the thing that it's at the heart, and I don't want you necessarily to answer it. You probably will, because I know you well enough to do it. Will. I said, conversation with somebody yesterday, 3 through 7's pretty crowded, in my opinion, right now. That's not an insult to anybody that's on in that area. To me, this is a good thing. Like I've talked about promotions, and I'm not saying this is an order. Look, Viral for the longest time, I'm as guilty as anybody. I said, hey, they only run every couple months. It's really hard for me to put them on the list. But after the show they just ran, the crowds they've ran for the last 2-3 shows that they've run, I'm like, okay, our lists are flexible a little bit. We can adjust on the fly here. So let's say Viral, Southern Fried, Coastal, the Bullpins, the Wrestle Americas, the Classic Cities. Just in case anybody hadn't kept up, that would be us. That's more than 5 people on the list if we've already got one fall in action on the list. So the list is pretty crowded beyond that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think Viral, they've done some huge things this year. They're the ones who are having like 600 ticket sellouts. They brought in Joe Hendry earlier this year. Southern Fried is a promotion that's about consistency. They have their tent pole, key shows, and I've been going there for years, and I've fought David in May, but they have their tent pole shows that are, spaced out quarterly or so. Coastal's got a YouTube show. I bet Coastal, if they were able to find a venue that was similar, they would be able to sell more tickets. I know they're very venue limited with how they can do. Bullpen's running multiple venues, and Bull Buchanan came out of nowhere, and they've run for like a year, and all of a sudden they blew up, and they're drawing really nice houses. As you mentioned, they run in Alabama on occasion too. I like the fact, Wrestle America is very much like Southern Fried in that they have consistency. Classic City, they do. Hey, we're going to run a show at 40 watt, and all their tickets are sold out in a few days. And then it's like, oh, hey, we're going to go to Nashville. We're going to run Basement East in Nashville. Okay, cool. They all of a sudden, it's really amusing sometimes when it just pops up, and I'm like, I didn't see that happening for Classic City, but that's really cool that they're, hey, I went to a show last December at the Eastern that they ran. It was a very entertaining show they ran. I forget which band they had, but it was like, this was a fun event. And, so they're running events all over, and they're doing the music fusion thing like nobody else is. So,
I think that's kind of like, I wanted to throw that when you were talking about Ricardo. I always say, like, Ricardo doesn't run wrestling shows. He runs events.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. And Classic City's very similar in the sense of, I'm like, it's not a straight wrestling show. It's an event. Like, you're going to get the music. You got to be into the whole vibe. And I think that served them well. And a lot of people, it's funny though, I'll ask you, we put these lists out, and then people, especially when we do the promotions editions and we spread them out it's just usually quarterly roughly when we kind of talk about it. And it's like, hey, this promotion belongs. And I'm like, let me guess, it's the one you go to every week or every month when they run. I'm like, I get it. A lot of the big vibe, as I try to tell people, the way I put a lot of stock into it is, where do talents want to work? They're going to tell me more who the Power 5 promotes, because the Power 5 isn't about who draws the most. It's not about who, there's other things. It's where are they all fighting to get onto those shows? To me, that's the Power 5.
That's a very interesting criteria. That's who do the wrestlers themselves see as the Power 5? That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah, because the reason I tell them is they see the value of working at the promotion more than, like, listen, if it was all about crowd size, with all due respect, they're going to know that I mean this respectfully. One fall shows don't draw the most, per show. Center Stage is it's a different creature, but they're weekly. When you see them here and there, it's not the biggest crowds you're going to see. But that's not their model. They're going to run, by the way, they're going to run 4 of them in a weekend. So yes, if they draw 150 to 200, add 4 shows up together, that's what they drew over the weekend.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and bring this up, because this is a discussion had earlier this year in regard to last year. I have several different venues, and I also have schools that I've run. I'm gonna guess that the top 2, and I don't know which order this would be, but I'm gonna guess the top 2 promotions based on this criteria are Action and One Fall. which promotions have drawn the most individual people that have bought tickets? I don't mean tickets sold. I don't mean like let's say you run a promotion and they sell 500 tickets a show, and then they run the next month they sell 500 tickets. There's a good chance a lot of those 500 people are the same. They're not unique. How many unique visitors do you think have seen? So, like, if I run a show at a school and I have 700, which I did in March, I had about 650 to 700. A lot of those are students. I ran another show in January and I drew about 600. And there's not a ton of crossover. So I have a lot of regular fans because I see, and I see it, and I have a lot of people who just buy tickets at the door, or they buy the student tickets. So that's not really like 600 and 700. That's more like, say, 1,000 or 1,200 individual people between those two shows. Add in, when you add in other events, like I just ran an event. I've got another one coming up this Monday at Meehan's, and I had 100 something people there, and most of those are fans who have, people who are coming out. So it's like, if you're talking about numbers, that's just an interesting wrinkle that I got talking with one of my friends about. Like, all right, maybe we haven't drawn 1,000 fans, but we have possibly had more unique visitors than anybody. So that's another thing, because I think about it all the time. Like, all right, if I have T-shirts to sell, I'm only going to sell this amount if I have one show. But if I have multiple events, I have the chance to sell T-shirts to maybe not 200 people, but like 1,200 people. So those are things I think about.
I agree. This conversation, I'm laughing because literally just had this conversation with a talent, and I was talking about, they're a one fall talent. I'll leave it at that. And I was talking about merch, and I'm like, you are not taking advantage of the opportunity that is in front of you, because you see on a monthly basis thousands of new fans, and they're like, yeah, but we only I'm like, no, but you're getting 150, 200 here, 100 to 250, 150, 100, 200 here. And I started adding all that math up and go, sure, there's a handful of people. The Watkinsville's Athens shows, they spill over, they're right next to each other, sure. But I'm like, but McDonough crowd, most of them aren't going to Gainesville. Like, they're not making that drive, and so forth and so on. I'm like, you have the potential. Like, they think like going to the, hey, if I get booked on this show that draws 300-400 every month, and I'm like, but primarily it's the same 300 or 400. When they buy your stuff, that's, by the way, hence was one of the things I created those collectible comic book covers, because I was trying to explain to people, if you change them constantly, it's new merch. When you just buy a bunch of shirts and they're laying there every month, they see the same shirt. There's no rush to buy it, and there's no, once they do buy it, you don't have anything new for them for a while.
Yep. I think that these are all incredibly, it's just really interesting as a thought experiment, because I'm always thinking about these things as a promoter. What is important? How do I sell merchandise? How do I, what's the best way to go about this? If I've run a show, and one of the reasons I think about it is I will meet somebody. I might meet somebody in Coweta County. It's like, oh yeah, you ran a show. Is that the wrestling that ran at Arnold Middle School? I'm like, yes, it was. And we're going back in January, because they have, somebody's got like a kid who goes there, or it's like, they went there with friends or something along those lines. There are so many things in the community that if you run multiple venues, you can get. And I think that's like, I think that's something that I'm trying to do. One Fall's doing, Bullpen, Classic City, get in front of multiple people, so that we have a base of hopefully several thousand people who can potentially come to shows when we run them around the state.
So now it's time to. I'm going to write my list down. You're probably, as we go through. Sorry, caps lock went off there. I always say it's great podcasting when I type as I'm trying to talk. My Power 5 today, Tuesday as we're recording, pretty cut and dry, I think, until I start arguing about 3 through 5. I said One Fall, They're 1, Action 2. I actually, believe it or not, have buckled, folks. You're going to be shocked. I have moved Viral into the top 5. I just think what they have accomplished over the last 3 months has overridden they only run every other month, to the point that I've put them on the list. I am still today, I will tell you this, and I say this, I know some of those guys listen. I think Crossroads is a massive, 100% pun intended, crossroads for where they sit. Southern Fried sits on my list. As of today, they are on that list. But Crossroads to me is huge for them, because I think they are at a place where they fall off of my 5. That doesn't mean they're not a great pro. I go see them as much as I possibly can. I love their shows. They do Southern wrestling, in my opinion, right up there with, if not better than anybody in the state. That's just my opinion. So it's not like that, but they are on the edge. So One Fall, Action, Viral, Southern Fried. There you go, folks. I've already had the conversation about Southern Honor, so now it kind of falls into all these other pieces. And as of right now, just because of things I know behind the scenes, I'll share some of that off of the air. I'm going to shock everybody, and I'm going to put Coastal as number 5. That's my 5. Do you dare make your list, or?
Oh yeah, I've got a mental list. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anybody on my list that you would just adamantly like, I would replace with such and such?
We share 4 of the same 5. Right now, and I'm not going to go ahead and do them like 1, 2, 3. I will use the same list, because again, so much of it depends on criteria, like what you see as the personal, like most important things, whether it's tickets sold, whether it's amount of shows, whether it's venues run, whether it's impact, as far as, because there are shows in the Southeast that we never hear about that run and draw, there's shows that draw hundreds of people. I know there's a show in Tennessee that drew incredible numbers that nobody knew about outside of like that local county. So it's like, you may grade them very highly, you may grade them very low, depending on what your personal impact is. But I am going to go, and there's going to be an asterisk on this one as well. I'm going to go with your same first 4, in no particular order. One Fall, myself in Action, very biased. Viral, because the numbers that they've been drawing are not flukes. I'm going to say Southern Fried, and I do believe, I've said it before, probably on the show, that I think that Todd Sexton is the best booker on independent wrestling in the state. I think the one reason that I'm not rating Classic City on this list is just because they haven't run as much as other shows. If Classic City had a show every month, they would easily be on this list. Because when they run events, they run really, really big events. So that's why they're not on here. It's just the amount of shows. I'm actually going to say, because I have a bias towards amount of shows and actual venues run, I'm going to say my number 5 is going to be Bullpen.
Listen, I have a great relationship with Bull. I've talked to him at Southern Fried, the last show they ran, and I think he's got a lot of cool stuff that he confided me in that are coming, and I think they were right there, like literally just a couple things that that's what I meant by it's gotten so close in that 3 to 7 range that I wouldn't argue with a ton of anybody's picks there. But I will tell you some picks that are going to get a lot of probably arguments. If you've been watching over the last few weeks, we've created a whole new segment as we go through, and it is the blind reveal. And well, Matt, I know I think you're a season ticket holder, right, to the Braves?
Mm-hmm.
So I know you're a baseball guy. So we've done some things in the past few weeks where we've done, Myron did the Waffle House. There you go. Zach Jameson did the Buffalo Bills. And I thought, Matt's a baseball guy. The Braves season has officially wrapped up, a couple weeks ago. Thank goodness. Hey, you had to be a little optimistic about the end of the season, though, right? Like the direction over the last few months of the season.
Yeah, but you know what? It's very tough looking back. Is there was a lot of excuses made, like, oh, the whole starting rotation was hurt, which it was, but they started the season 0-7.
Yep.
If you start a season 0-7, that's very bad. And 2 years ago they had a lot of players like, all right, was that how they normally play? Was that the median game, or did 2023 just have some players who overshot the mark all at the same time and they aren't as good? And this is about how good the Braves are. I don't know.
Before we dive into the list, I'm going to ask you one that I saw. I listen to a lot of sports podcasts, folks, as you probably can imagine. I used to do like a ton of wrestling ones, but I've dove into like movies and sports. I'm like, I need a break sometimes from wrestling when I'm not doing these type of things. I heard somebody pitch one the other day, and I just want to ask you, short as concise, nothing long-winded. Is trading Ronald Acuna even a table item like you would even consider if somebody made that phone call? If you could just clean the house, because you're going to have to pay him, right? The contracts are it's going to even get bigger.
Yeah, but baseball's not the same. I would not trade him. Baseball's not the same as the NBA, where you have luxury taxes and you have to hire like literal statisticians to keep mid-level exceptions, etc. And you can only pay because of
first tier, second tier.
So like baseball is like have as big a payroll as you want. So I think Acuna has enmeshed and entrenched himself as the superstar. And I think you need to keep those type of guys. Like you think about those players, with the Braves and outside the Braves who are their players who basically spent their whole career in one spot. And I think Acuna needs to be that guy here. I think more than anybody actually on the lineup, Acuna needs to be the guy here. I would not clear the decks for him because of more than baseball. If you were looking at purely at a numbers and money standpoint, you probably could justify it, but you need to have that franchise talent.
So no fear in the Dodgers or the Yankees or somebody just coming in and just throwing a number that's how you just lose him.
Oh, I mean, I'm not. I think it's very possible they lost him. I mean, somehow the Braves lost Freddie Freeman, which is still reading some of the details on that is mind-boggling. Yes. How you lose a guy who wants to play here because you get just
when a guy cries that he got like how does that even happen? Like if a guy cares that much to be here. No, I agree.
I mean, that's very weird. That's why I think we don't have a Freddie Freeman. I think he was the guy, so I think you have to keep Acuna. I like those legacy. I like the legacy players. I'm a Red Sox fan too. I got the Boston B tattooed on my leg. I literally described that I'm a Braves fan because I'm grandfathered in. My grandfather grew up a Boston Braves fan. The Braves moved, then he became a Red Sox fan. And I do like the Braves. They're in the National League, so it makes rooting a little bit easier. But when you think about classic Red Sox players over the last 20, 25 years, you think a lot about David Ortiz. You don't think about players so much like Johnny Damon or Manny Ramirez because they left. They left. You think about Dustin Pedroia because he's, Johnny Damon left the Red Sox. He played for the Yankees. He shaved all his hair. He basically lost all his personality. So, Acuna can make himself a legacy, even if he doesn't win. I mean, how many World Series did Dale Murphy win?
And he's one of the most beloved guys in Atlanta, right? So let me ask you this to wrap it up then.
All right, let's go.
You match any contract he's offered. No questions asked.
I mean, I'm probably matching it. Yeah, it's not my money, but there is so much value in the franchise having a franchise guy that yes, I would probably go up to whatever a max is.
There's also goodwill there that you lose. I feel like if you lose him, that was the question that I had.
There's so many other things. There's players that I would let go, but Man, if you're talking about players who are beloved now and will be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know who else is potentially on the horizon right now that could be here in 10 years.
Because you brought up Freeman, and I think if you let Acuna walk, those two things become joined. Like you let it happen once, and then you allowed it to happen again. So it's like, do not let it happen again. That's why I was glad you brought up Freeman. But all right, man. Well, let's dive into it. I'm going to give you 7 names. Some may surprise you, some may not, but you're going to rank them 1 through 7 blindly. Hence the name Blind Reveal. I'm going to start with an easy one for you.
It's going to be hilarious when Sid Bream ends up at number 1.
Chipper Jones.
All right, we're going to go with. I'm going to be quick on this. We're going to go with Chipper Jones. I'm penciling him on my list at number 3.
That's crazy that's literally where I had, because I figured that's where it was going to go. So we got Chipper Jones at 3. I would agree with that. And I just mean from, if I was blindly ranking him, I would probably put him in that pecking order because there's always a few that I would be afraid would be ahead of him. Number 2, Phil Necro.
We're going to put Phil. I'm going to put Phil Necro in at. It's either 5 or 6. I'm going to put him in at 6 because I'm trying to also guess who you might add on the list, and I might regret putting him in here instead of 4 or 5. But I'm going to put Phil Necro in at 6.
Nope, perfect. Hank Aaron.
I mean, there were 2 players that I was hoping I would get for 1 and 2, and we're putting Hank Aaron in. You talk about those legendary athletes like we just were. Hank Aaron gets the top spot.
That might have been too easy because I don't care what list is when it comes to Braves. That's where I put him. So maybe that was too easy.
Well, if you had said another name, I might have put them first in case you weren't going to say Hank Aaron.
Dale Murphy.
Oh, I love Dale Murphy. I'm putting Dale Murphy in. God. Because if you say like Andrew Jones next, I'm going to really regret it putting Dale Murphy 5. So I'm going to put Dale Murphy at 4. I'm holding the second spot because there's really one player I want you to say.
All righty, you ready? Greg Maddux.
Greg Maddux, yep. I got my one. I like this game because my game was, if I was making a list, it's Hank Aaron at 1 and Greg Maddux at 2. Now, had you said Greg Maddux instead of Hank Aaron first, it might have been swapped, but those were going to be my top 2 guys.
If you're a listener or a watcher on YouTube and you're not familiar with Greg Maddux at all, just Google crazy Greg Maddux statistics. There are some stats that are there that are just mind-boggling when you talk about walks and things like that.
He is the most interesting pitcher, and if you see him, especially in his early days with the Cubs, and he just looks like...
Yeah.
He just looks like a pitcher, and it's like, okay, but that guy who looked like that is the most intimidating pitcher, except the one player he absolutely hated to play against. He'd be like, yep, I could do this against any player I wanted except that motherfucker Tony Gwynn. Tony Gwynn.
No, I was about to say, you want to talk about crazy statistics? That's another guy that you're like, when you look up statistics, those two I have a field day just randomly looking up odd statistics of theirs. It's just bananas about he walked X amount of players, 90% of them were intentional or stuff like that, or it's like crazy stuff like that. But
so I like this list because if you had just given me 5 names and these 5 to rank them all, I would have ranked them in this exact order. So I'm doing pretty good.
John Smoltz.
Oh, see now he's going to be probably Smoltz should be higher. I might be favoring Smoltzy because I get to hear him on TV broadcasts, and I shared an airplane with him once. But John Smoltz is going in at 5.
This one's and look, by the way, this shows you the depth of who we pack at the top of our list. I could have done 10 because I'm going to end the list. He's going in at number 7, Tom Glavine.
Oh, jeez. Well, Tom Glavine's in at 7. I was wondering if you were going to throw a real curveball with like fan favorite players like Sid Bream or um, Javi Lopez or my wife loved Ron Gant's tight pants.
Well, you got Mark Lemke. You know who my wife? She was a big Jeff Blouser fan of all things. You know, or it's it just there's tons of players that because look, we lived through some very, very bad years of Braves, and I think people forget that sometimes. Claudel Washington and etc. You know, like there's a run of guys that were like, oh yeah, but we loved them, so I get it. So at the end, the blind reveal, you had Hank Aaron number 1, Greg Maddux 2, Chipper Jones 3, Dale Murphy 4, Smoltzy at 5, Necro at 6, and Tom Glavine at 7.
I would definitely make some changes, but I overall like the list. I
love it.
Putting Tom Glavine in there for the last one, I guess, is kind of evil, but
that's the fun part of the game. That's 100% what the game is all designed for. It's all about fun. And hey, look, we've talked about it. I'm going to share this with you off air, but one of the things that is fun, we give those 8.5 by 11s. We do those exclusively every month to our Patreon members at the $25 level or higher. The $10 level gets the digital version of it. But it's not physically signed by the wrestlers. And I tell you, man, the reason I think that's such a great value, I will go ahead and tell you, I assure you, the person signing those this week, you would pay this price alone for these pictures. I had to reach out to them yesterday and get confirmation that they would do it, and they agreed, and they have said, yep. And I'm like, you would pay $25 for this autographed 8.5 by 11 alone, but you get all of the value included with the Patreon, man. So I think it's a great value, but that's my opinion.
Now I just assume it's me who's signing them.
I promise you, folks, it's not Matt. Well, man, hey, I appreciate you coming on. I'm glad you're part of the rotation. I just, love your perspective. You're super familiar with a lot of the people across the state. So I think there's a value to that, and I hope the listeners do. Hey, next time you're on, we'll do some questions again. tappedoutpod@gmail.com, listeners, watchers, send those in, and I'll try to be better about that, about posting. The problem is a lot of it over the last couple of weeks. My schedule's been so hectic, it was kind of last minute of getting everything lined up. But I do have the next 3 weeks already confirmed and locked up. So that is good hopefully for all you guys, so we can be able to get those questions in and everything. But man, like I said, I can't thank you enough for coming on, man.
Always glad to talk to you. Make sure you follow Action Wrestling on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and heck, I got shows coming up Friday night, October 17th in Tyrone. We're live on IWTV. And I go to Nashville Saturday and Sunday to run some shows in East Park as part of the Tennessee Hot Sauce Festival. Come back Monday night, October 20th, our second show at Meehan's Public House in Vinings. So I've got a full weekend myself. So
yeah, man.
Real glad we could talk before everything goes to hell for me.
Yeah, no, listen, and like you said, he's going to be Friday. That's where I'm going to be this Friday. I'll be there as well. So we always tell you, man, look, we appreciate you listening, and we try to support indie wrestling here. But the best way, and the absolute best way, is that we tell you, get in your car, go down to the show, Tyrone, this Friday. Like I said, I'll be there on Friday. Buy your ticket, and then I promise you, if you do all of that, you'll see both of us at the matches.